So just a few things before we start. You will be able to ask questions through the chat feature. On the side, you can view other people's questions, and we have two people that will be monitoring this. Mrs. Courtney Almeida, our high school principal. Courtney, will you give a wave? Thank you. She will be the one asking the questions that are posted in the side chat, and then we have Mrs. Youngberg, who is going to work to group questions and moderate the entire session. So with that said, please post your questions and we will get to them as quickly as we can. We do only have an hour as we have a board meeting after this. So if there's anything left unanswered, we will get answers to you after this meeting. Originally, we got guidance from the state that we would need to come up with reopening with not a lot of detail as to what that would need to include. So we started planning, and then we got a document from State Ed that outlined more specifics of what we would need, and we're told this would be due on the 31st. We had about a week and a half to do an entire plan for how to reopen school. So in no way will we be able to answer all of your questions tonight. We are going to try, we'll give you the best answers we can. We also are cognizant of the fact that the plan that we have presented right now is our plan right now. Guidance is changing, it's changing daily, and our students' needs and our families' needs are changing. So we will be adapting to meet those needs, and we will probably hold another community meeting closer to the start of school if things change off what we talked about tonight. Also, please know that everything we discuss is not our plan for the entire school year. It's our plan for right now. We're looking at it in almost 10-week increments. So this might continue past 10 weeks, but in no way is what we're discussing tonight going our plan for an entire year of instruction. So once we found out we were going to need to submit a plan and we got more guidance on that, we looked at all of the different areas that we would need to discuss. And it was a Herculean task to be able to focus on the specific PPE for an individual and what time the buses would need to be there to stagger and what the seating arrangement would be on a bus and the lunch schedule. So it really needed to be broken up in the district so that we could have well thought out answers for everyone. So what we did was, as an admin team, we met. We discussed the guidance as a whole with the department heads. We went through each page and discussed what we would need to do to make sure we had a cohesive plan. We then broke into work groups, and if anyone on this call participated in a work group, I know it was very fast turnaround. We were calling people last minute and saying, can you come in? So thank you very much for being part of one of those groups. Those work groups met to discuss the many different issues that were needed to be discussed around different modules. There was an administrator that facilitated each work group. Those administrators then came back and met with me after each sessions. My job was to make sure we had a very cohesive plan at the end of this. So if the administrator and work group that was in charge of PPE did not line up with our busing work group, we were going to have an issue. So we were constantly talking amongst ourselves as well. So this plan is divided into big rocks. We decided to use the same language that BOCES represented, only we had to modify because we're obviously a much smaller admin team than BOCES with a much smaller staff. So we went with big rocks again and modules. So tonight when you ask questions, administrators will be jumping in, and I'll swoop in where I can based on if they covered the module or not. So the modules we identified were daily necessities. Those were handled by Jamie Rogers. Those encompass transportation, budget, and child nutrition. Safety was handled by Mr. David Davison. He is our interim high school principal. Thanks, Dave. Dave's safety modules were schedules, pods, and cohorts, cleaning and disinfecting, facilities and social distancing, and containment plans. Health and wellness was our new elementary principal, Mrs. Brandy Meacham. Hi, Brandy. Thank you. Health and wellness covered face covering and PPE, social and emotional well-being, health and safety, and chronic absenteeism. Instruction was covered by Mrs. Carrie Davenport. Those modules include training, certification and teaching, special and bilingual education, and teaching and learning. And I took relationships, which is communication and community, hiring and staffing, evaluations, closure, and making sure we have a cohesive plan and the overall organization of the document. Please know that our next steps after hosting these calls, we also surveyed the community, so that input was included in our planning. But our next steps after having each of these calls is to assess our vulnerable populations in the school. We already did a staff survey and we have a rather large vulnerable population at Pine Valley. So we will be meeting with staff members and with families to work on meeting the accommodations necessary to open our school in a safe way. We also have some work to do with both unions. So in no way is this a finalized, here we go, we can implement this now plan. This is just where we're at right now in our overarching plan for the district. So to give you an overview, what we're looking at is 3 days of 4 days of in-person instruction and 1 day of remote instruction with staggered busing. We'll be implementing a double loop. The reason we're doing that is so that we can have students staggered on the bus and provide for more social distancing. The plan with that is also that we need to have our elementary students in building longer than our high school students because we have a lot of families that depend on older siblings for daycare either in the morning or the afternoon. We are doing everything we can to provide in-person instruction, but it is a little bit, it's contingent on a lot of factors right now. So as we work through your questions, please know that you might get some I don't knows from us. And again, we'll get back to you. So with that said, we'll open the floor up to any questions from people in the community. And Mrs. Almeida.
Okay, perfect. Welcome, everyone. So the first question will be, can we speak to why Pine Valley has not yet included a remote or hybrid option in addition to the full model? Going along with that, what is the alternative if parents are not comfortable sending their children back to school?
So right now, the governor has not come out and said that a remote model is mandatory for districts. That could change tomorrow. If he comes out and says that we have to supply a remote model to families that are not comfortable, we will have to pivot and do that. The reason we have not done that yet, it's not a simple answer, so I'm going to give you all of it so that you know the different factors, because we have discussed this ad nauseum. If I could provide a full remote option with a full in-person option, absolutely would be. But because we're a smaller school and because our community, 80% replied that they wanted to be in person, we will not have, the easiest remote model would be at each grade level or at each content, we would have one teacher doing remote, one teacher doing in person. We have too many kids that need to be on campus to be able to provide that. So the next model would be synchronous learning, which would be, some districts are looking at this. So you could have a camera in the classroom and maybe have 10 kids in front of you as a teacher and then 10 kids at home and be teaching them simultaneously. NYSED as a whole across the state is fighting this model, and several unions, including ours, is against this model. I understand their perspective. It opens you up to the fact that if you're a teacher and you have little Johnny sitting in front of you and little Johnny is falling behind and struggling, every kid that's getting home remote learning is now in a house with parents that are also seeing little Johnny struggling. And it opens you up to all of those concerns and parents seeing other children's learning needs. And there's a lot of issues with confidentiality there. So unions are kind of fighting this model at this point, and we're not in a place where we can offer that. So in order for us to be able to go remote, we would need a lot more staff. If we have to offer remote, you'll see us pivot rather dramatically from the 4-day in-person and the 1-day remote. The reason we don't want to do that, and we weighed all of these options because believe me, I would love to offer both. I really would. But the reason we didn't do that was because 80% of our community said they'd prefer in person. We understand the community we're in and that we have a community of workers that need to be able to go to work, and to go to work and not get your kid in daycare, which isn't going to have the same level of social distancing, you need to be able to send your kid to school. So we really wanted to be reflective on the fact that our school in a way drives the community, the financial stability of our community, and we need to get kids in-house. In addition to that, we also have 31% of our district that cannot receive Wi-Fi. And by cannot receive Wi-Fi, I don't mean, a lot of my colleagues have said to me, well, Brina, just buy a MiFi device and put it out there. And I'm going, no, you don't understand. There are parts of the district that literally cannot receive Wi-Fi, to the point where we put our tech team in a van and had them drive the district because they did not believe the Wi-Fi providers, Windstream, Verizon, AT&T. They took different devices to see if we could get anything to connect, and we couldn't. So that means if we provide remote, we have to do something that's equitable for our entire district. So that would be paper-based. which what we saw in the spring, I am not somebody that's going out there and saying, I think other districts maybe did this better, but that was ideal for learning. We saw a lot of kids falling behind. We had massive issues with the paper-based instruction, and we already are a district that needs to work on their student achievement. That's part of why I'm here. I really am focused on making our kids readers and writers and really proficient at math. We want to improve there. So going solely to paper-based when we already saw it wasn't working very well would be a huge problem. If we don't go, there's also more requirements. I need to add that too from the state. The first time around, they were like, oh, you got to go remote. We're going to be easy on you. This time around, there are a lot more requirements tied to being able to offer remote learning. So in order to provide remote learning, I'm sorry I'm speaking to this for so long, but I know I'm going to get more questions about this, and I want you to know this answer was well thought out, and we really, if you have an idea that I'm not saying, please send it to me because I'm open. But the issue is, if we go to remote, we're going to need staff to be able to do that and do it effectively. Like we're talking about if we end up closed again, basically creating a Pine Valley Geek Squad that drives to the homes with no internet, picks up devices, takes them to a place that would have internet, lets people download, or picks kids up and brings them to the parking lot on buses socially distanced. We just don't have that staff to be able to do the 4 days, 1 day, and provide that. We can't. There's been a lot of confusion thus far about the fact that the high school is part remote and the elementary is not. So I also want to clarify that. The high school being part remote is at the beginning or the end of the day. The teachers are not doing double duty there. We can't ask our teachers to teach classes in front of them and in person and also be doing this entire remote option. They'd be working, 24 hours straight. I'm sorry I went on so long for that. I hope I answered quite a few questions about that. I know that's a big concern. Mrs. Almeida.
Perfect. Just clarifying, for one, piggybacking off of that, I have 5 children and limited internet. Just wondering if the thumb drive will be an option again if we have to go remote.
So we are talking about the thumb drive. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to toss this to Carrie in a minute. I believe our option, if we have to go completely remote, is going to be far better than the thumb drive, but that will be our fallback. Carrie?
So if we are in a situation where we are going fully remote, we have a couple of different layers of supports in place. What we did learn from our previous experiences with remote is even those that had internet still needed support to be able to access content and information. It wasn't as easy as go in here, open it up, download it, and you're good to go. So we wanted to be able to offer more supports both to the students and the families. So what you're going to see is us utilizing platforms such as Microsoft Teams that they'll be using when they're in person as well, so that should we need to pivot and go remote, then that platform has already been used in class with the teacher with support so that the students are more familiar with it. If we shift to remote, students will have their devices. And if you don't have internet, Brina mentioned we're going to create a Pine Valley Geek Squad, and we're going to have several vehicles with trained staff members in it that will do one of a couple of different things. They may, if it's simple as you need a hotspot to be able to connect to the internet, you'll receive at least one scheduled time a week, possibly 2, depending on the number of families impacted, where that Geek Squad will come to your house, sit in the driveway. Your student will be able to connect. If they have difficulty connecting, there'll be a trained person to provide on-site support right then and there. If that person isn't able to rectify the situation, we will have a command center on site that they can call into to get additional layers of support. If that still can't figure out why the device isn't connecting and stuff isn't downloading and uploading, they'll take the device from the student, bring it back to campus, troubleshoot it, fix it. If they can't fix it, reissue the device, and then bring that device back out to the family. If you live in an area where you can't connect to a hotspot, then that device will be picked up, taken to a location with internet. As soon as it syncs, the student's work will upload. At the same time as the teacher's information will download to the device, and then that device will be returned back kind of in a loop back on site. In the meantime, that Geek Squad is also going to be able to provide support for students that might have internet at home but are running into technical difficulties. You'll be able to call into the school, and the technology command center will then be able to deploy one of the Geek Squads out to you to provide socially distanced support in that manner. We are going to have jump drives on hand as a backup if we have to go to that. extreme, but I do think starting in person and being able to really work with our teachers to strengthen that capacity and work with the students, that you'll see us be better equipped and more able to kind of work with the platform at home, so that we won't necessarily need the jump drive exchange. But again, it's there when we exhaust all options and we just can't seem to make it work. It is a backup plan.
Wonderful, thank you. These next few questions are centered around the high school. First question, when will high school students receive their schedules? And then along that, I'm concerned about participation for students enrolled in both these programs. With the limited hours for high school students, will they be able to start their scheduled programs?
So we'll start with the high school students receiving their schedules. We anticipate having the high school schedule finalized early next week. Want to get those schedules out to teachers, and I would anticipate by the week of the 24th, ideally sooner, but I can't promise that, we will get schedules out to the high school students. In regards to the BOCES question, we've heard from BOCES that they are running what they refer to as an AABB schedule. So on Monday and Tuesday, the A cohort would go to BOCES. Wednesday is a day of remote learning for both the A and B cohort. And then the B cohort would go on Thursday and Friday. So we have asked or requested of BOCES that we would be in the B cohort, which would allow our students full participation on the Friday, definitely in their schedules. And we are working with our transportation department to find creative ways to make sure that our kids get all of their time on Thursdays. And so we're pretty close to that. And I believe BOCES is starting on Wednesday, September 9th. So as soon as we have confirmation from BOCES that we will be in the B cohort, we will let people know.
I'm going to jump onto that a little bit. Also with that, because they're doing an AABB schedule, they're going to have remote learning for their other 3 days. And we're building in office hours for those students into their schedule, so that while they're on campus with us the other time, they'll have internet availability and support to be able to engage and get all of that information from their programs, so that they're right on track with their other peers.
Thank you. Along with high school, please describe how physical education, band, and chorus will work for high school students. In addition, with phys ed, especially for middle and high school, because there's no locker room, how are we going to deal with hygiene concerns?
So with the physical education, the band, and the chorus, that is a 12-foot social distancing space as opposed to the 6-foot, which poses challenges with space when you have a high number of students in classes. So what we are looking at right now for PE, and we realize without using locker rooms and everything, PE will look differently than it has in the past. With the middle school students, we will be pushing the PE teachers on elective days into the classrooms to work with the kids on fitness and nutrition and things of that nature. Band and chorus right now, as we know them from last year, will not be the same at the start of school. Things may change. We know and realize that music is important in everybody's lives. And we are trying to find ways to make sure that our kids do get into music and have access to music. Did I answer all those, Courtney?
Yes, thank you. Next question, will after-school instruction be available to students that are in need of extra support?
At this time, no. Again, this is the next 10 weeks. We're going to do the best we can to accommodate even having kids in our building in person. So we won't be offering, with the staggered bus times and keeping kids together in cohorts, we won't be offering anything like that at this time. That could change.
Twofold question, will we be able to use a pool? And what about sports, football?
At this point in time, sports have been postponed by New York State indefinitely. So at this point, there is no sports. I would anticipate an update at some point in early September, and that includes football. And we are trying to limit the number of visitors to the school. So pool use will be out. And also, as someone had said in the previous question asking about lockers, we will not be using any locker space. So the answer is no to being able to use the pool right now.
Thank you. When is school starting and when will elementary students know their teachers?
Brandy?
All right, our school calendar remains the same, so we're still anticipating a start of September 8th. And as far as knowing who our teachers are, similar to what Dave said, we're looking to finalize our schedules and plans next week and speak with the teachers that are going to have some changes or might have some changes. And ideally by that week of the 24th, we would be able to communicate that with all of our elementary families as well.
Brandy, I'm going to piggyback off of that and say we are sorry about the late notice. I know I have a son in going into first grade, and I would love to be able to get him hyped up about his teacher. We have a few cohorts that are too large for the 2 sections we currently have. So we're going to need to add a teacher in order to ensure social distancing for those classes. So that could look a couple different ways. There is a debate about if we will be able to offer pre-K. If we can't offer pre-K this coming year, our pre-K teachers would be our added teachers at those grade levels. If we can offer pre-K, we would end up finding someone else, another teacher in the district, a certified teacher in that area, obviously, but to cover those positions. But that's why class lists haven't gone out yet, because we're not sure. We've been waiting to hear about pre-K funding before we made that decision.
Thank you. I have a special education child going into 6th grade. He'll be going to the high school. What days and times will he go? Will he ride the same bus as his siblings?
So our students in special ed will, right now we're working on transportation. We're hoping that those students in the multi-age classrooms will ride the early bus, the first bus shift, and stay a little bit later so we can accommodate all of their related services and provide them additional support. And that's one of the ways that we're making sure our students with IEPs are getting support and getting the services that they need. And depending on their placement in their classes will depend on whether that support will require them to ride a different bus than maybe the high school age students. But if they do ride the high school bus, there still are accommodations in the schedule so that those students also get their services and needs met. It's just depending on, again, once that high school schedule gets finalized, looking at our service providers and seeing how that impacts and what works best for our students.
So, what are the plans for high school students who are in advanced math and science? Will they move classrooms to be able to be in advanced classes?
So with our schedule for students in advanced placement and JCC college classes, that was one of the things in trying to put our schedule together. Because as you know, as kids move up beyond their freshman year, they begin taking divergent pathways to graduation, following their interests and everything. So one of our goals in putting together the schedule was to be able to offer as many electives as we possibly can, given the parameters of space and everything. So that led us to go with a flipped classroom model where the teacher records the instruction, the students will watch it, they will work through any homework, any problems, and then when they're back in school, have that opportunity to work with the teacher. So we realized that teacher-student contact time is important, and felt that the flipped classroom model allows us to reach students. So if we have an 11th grader and maybe a senior who are both taking, let's say, AP US History, to reach as many students as possible in a safe manner and continue to provide opportunities for our kids.
Yeah. Are we required to send in even more supplies for the classroom to stay clean and sanitized? And when can supplies lists come out to start shopping?
Brandy. No, we're not going to cost you more money, but Brandy.
So I believe the supply list for elementary school, the grade levels is available online, so you can look there. And we will not be asking for things such as Clorox wipes or hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer specifically can't be in any of our buses because it's flammable, so we're discouraging that. It's our job as the district to supply those, and we have specific cleaning protocols that we have to follow, and you have to use very specific chemicals that are safe. Students will be required to have a face mask. And so that's one thing that families can look into providing. Obviously, we'll have extras available here if you cannot get them, but we are asking that you look for some for your students. As far as high school supplies or anything specifically needed there, Dave?
So we're trying to work through that right now. Teachers are waiting to get their schedules and see exactly everything that they're offering, but we are focusing on limiting any contact. There will be no sharing of materials and everything. So we will get a list out to you as soon as we can get the schedule to the teachers.
Speaking of masks, will kids be required to wear masks at their desk?
So our guidance does require that all students and staff wear masks throughout the day. And that's for everybody's safety. When our teachers are standing up front giving direct instruction and can stay distanced from the students, that will be the time in the day that students can take a break from their masks. And we're recommending 10 minutes of every 40 minutes. And that's about the time, that's about a class period. And so that'll allow for that break. If there are additional times in the day where the teacher is going to be up front teaching and not walking around the classroom and getting near students and giving feedback, then there can be additional breaks. If students have sensory needs or are asthmatic or have some other issues that the masks are difficult to wear for longer periods of time, then we will adjust their breaks as needed on an individual basis. And all of our desks are going to be facing forward, so everybody's going the same direction. We're trying to put everything we can in place and maintaining that 6x6 social distancing to help with that mask wearing and keeping everybody healthy.
Update, there is a middle school supply list out. Is there a plan for kids that live with someone more vulnerable or a child more vulnerable?
So if you look at our reopening plan, it's actually on slide 94. Yeah, I said that right, 94. If you have a student with medical needs or might be part of that vulnerable population, or you think that you might fall into that vulnerable population, there is a process in place. It begins with contacting your school principal. So that will, as of Monday, be Mrs. Courtney Almeida at the high school or Mrs. Brandy Meacham at the elementary school. And they will help you kind of go through that process of exploring how we can support your student and meet their needs.
Thank you. Any orientation for 7th graders? Will 7th graders have an opportunity to tour the school after they receive their schedules so they will know where to go, since they did not have the opportunity to do that at the end of the 6th grade year?
So we are looking at doing a virtual tour of the high school to get the kids accustomed to where things are, although they will be limited in their movement in the school. And we get it that coming into 7th grade is a scary thing, moving over to the big school and all of that. So we're doing some work ahead of that schedule to make that as easy a transition as possible. And I think staff will be hypersensitive to the fact that this is all new to, it's all new. This is going to be all new to everybody coming in and how things are working. So we will put people in place and help our kids get along. But I think the virtual tour at this point is what we will be offering.
Thank you. Okay, so if we opt to keep our kids home, what do we have to do is one question. And then similarly, what about families who are not comfortable with the current plan and unable to full homeschool? What is your recommendation, or what is our recommendation?
So first, let's take the first part, because because that's, I think, the simplest part. If you are not comfortable sending your child to school at all and you want to keep them home, you would have to apply to homeschool. You would contact the main office and get a homeschooling packet. If you have a child that is vulnerable or has some sort of, it needs some sort of accommodation, we will work with you, and that's the contact your school principal, contact Mrs. Davenport, and we will work with you to come up with those accommodations. We understand we may have students that are part of the vulnerable population that their accommodation is remote learning. That is a different thing for us to be able to handle as a district. If we have 10 students who are part of a vulnerable population and we have to have a remote learning coordinator that goes to the teachers and gets the work and is able to convert that to a remote format for 10 students, that's possible. We can't facilitate remote learning across the board, across the grade levels for every single family that wants to with our current staffing. That's the big line for us. So we are willing to make it, we have to make accommodations, not willing to, for students that are part of that vulnerable population. For a family that has a child that is not part of the vulnerable population, that wishes to homeschool, that wants supports, we're a customer service-based school. We will work with you where we can, but in no way can we provide instruction the way we did in the spring. That is not our role. There are so many more mandates around remote instruction. It would be on you as the family to homeschool.
There is a question going off of that. If they were to decide to homeschool, would Pine Valley could put in time potentially provide a transition plan back to public school for families within 6 months or a year? Looking at textbook loans, quarterly reports, IHIP supports would be welcomed by many families. They share that, yes, we all work too, but we are concerned for the health and safety of our families, and with the likely potential of sudden shift to remote learning, in-home instruction could provide lower stress and better consistency for some. And then how can we address this district-wide rather than on an individual basis?
So right now there are districts that are not allowing, they're setting dates, I shouldn't say not allowing, but they're setting dates if families decide to homeschool when students can re-enroll. We've opted not to do that. If you try homeschooling, I respect the fact that we're all in a land we don't understand and have no idea what we're walking into. So if you decide to homeschool your child and you call us a month in and go, this is a train wreck, please take them back. We're going to take them back. We're going to help, and we will work on a transition for your children. I 100% respect that, and we are a small enough district we're able to do that. In regard to addressing the remote learning need district-wide, once again, unless Governor Cuomo comes out with something or state ed comes out with something that says we have to provide a remote option, in which case you will see us have to pivot from the 4 days on, 1 day off, and change that offering significantly. I'm not sure exactly how we would change that, but we have a few ideas that I won't get into here and bore everyone since they're kind of not on the table right now. But unless that happens, we won't be offering something district-wide that is remote, unless you're part of the vulnerable population. We just don't have the staff to do that at this time and also offer 4 days. A lot of the districts that are offering remote learning with in-person learning have factors that are very different than us. Either they have a full Wi-Fi capable district, so it takes less manpower. That's one option. Another option is they have cohorts of kids coming in 2 days at a time throughout the week. We're not doing that. We want families to be able to have their students in school as much as they can, or they have more staff, or they have teachers that have agreed to the synchronous instruction, which is very rare.
With COVID-19 still out there, would canceling the first semester be optional?
So at this point, no, schools are still tied. We have to get our days in this coming year. We need our kids back to school. That has not been an option that's on the table at all.
Would high school students be able to volunteer as tech support for the community service hours?
So I've had this question before, and I love this question. This is a big maybe, though, because we're limiting people into the building and we're limiting people's access to others. So I'm open to this idea. I think it would be up to our tech team and how comfortable they are. If they are willing to take that on and train the student in safety procedures, and once we get into this, I would say, Yes, but right now I can't commit us to that because we don't know exactly what we're walking into, if that makes sense. We need to get into this land first before we take kids on into this land.
Thank you. If my child will not need the bus, should I contact the transportation department to free up potential space for another student?
Jamie?
Yes, please. So on our buses, we can only utilize 11 seats. So we need people to let us know as soon as possible if you don't need the bus, or if there's a different address that your child will be getting on and off the bus. We're allowing for one address to keep things consistent, because we'll have to leave that seat open every day for that student. So yes, if you're not needing transportation, please let us know. And if you're going to any location besides home, we need to know that as well.
Yep. What is lunch going to look like for students? Are they going to be able to sit together?
So at the middle school, high school, towards the end of our academic day, we are looking to run what we call an office period, where students can begin doing homework. They can hop into teacher-run Zooms to ask questions of the teachers and have that interaction. And because, quite honestly, we're using every inch of square space in the building for a classroom, so we can have our kids on campus every day. The lunches will be delivered to the classrooms while the kids are in their office space.
Thank you. How will we control keeping kids safe in the hallway?
So as we look at students moving around the hallway, aside from training the students about keeping social distancing, having signs in the hallway about social distancing and markers and little paw prints at the elementary, and signage about keeping to the right, we will be using people to monitor, staff to monitor the hallways to make sure kids are following, whether it's going down the hallway or going up the stairs, and doing our best to keep social distance, make sure people have their masks on when they're in common areas, and make sure they're sticking to the right.
Thank you. I don't see how you will get a younger child to keep a mask on for a long period of time. My child has a hard time breathing in the mask.
I'll jump in and then I'll pivot to Brandy. I have a first grader. It's going to be a nightmare. To whatever parent asks this, I agree with you. It's going to be a nightmare. We are going to teach them. We're going to make sure they have breaks. We're going to talk about the importance, just like we teach everything else in school. We're going to have to practice this. It's the new world we live in, just like we teach our kiddos to keep shoes on. It's a sad thing to have to do. It breaks my heart a little bit, but I do know that we have a new elementary principal who is very similar in her mindset to me and so kind and caring that when I said, you got to get these kids out of their classroom, she goes, yep, I got a whole plan for playground schedules and wiping them down. So I'm going to let her do that. So please don't picture your baby sitting at a desk all day long with a mask on. We're going to do everything we can to keep that from happening.
As a mom of a young boy with some sensory needs, I've also found that different masks are easier to breathe in and more comfortable for him. So I would recommend, talking to your child and trying a few different things to see what fits them best. And like we said, we do have masks available for students, but some students are going to need something different. My son prefers the bandeau ones that can sit around his neck and then just come up onto his face. They are a little bit of more satiny type feel, and they're more comfortable for him, and they stay tight around his face and he doesn't have to keep playing with it. So that makes me happier as a mom that he's not touching things all the time. But my daughter doesn't think that looks very cool, and she wants to have the one that wraps around her ear with a fancy little design. So we will try to find what works best for each student the best we can. We know that we have students that are going to need the clear window so that they can get their speech services or read the emotions and the facial expressions of the teacher so they can follow social cues. So just like anything else we do as educators, we need to adapt to what the students need, but still keep that requirement of the face masks on.
Continuing with masks, I know it is listed in the posted plan, but can we explain in more detail what happens when a kid refuses to wear a mask? Are procedures different between high school and elementary?
So at the middle school, high school, if a student's refusing to wear a mask, the teacher will call down to the office and we will go up, bring the student down here, have a conversation about the importance of wearing a mask and not only for protecting themselves, but protecting everyone else. If the child will be asked to put the mask on and go back to class, if they refuse to do that and comply with that, then we will be calling the parent to come in and pick them up.
So it's a similar process for elementary school, except that we know we're working with younger students that may not fully comprehend why, or maybe a little bit more forgetful and have some processing needs and whatever it may be. So it's an individual basis, and we're going to have some grace at the beginning of the year as we're trying to teach students the importance of these. And a 5-year-old might forget and take it down for a minute to make a funny face at a friend or something like that. So that's going to be handled a little bit differently than just a blatant refusal to wear a mask at all. So if we don't have a medical reason for not wearing that mask, then we need to worry about protecting other students and the teachers and staff here in the building. And so we will retrain the student and call the parents if necessary.
Thank you. Is there guidance on how to handle a child who is presenting with any symptoms related to COVID-19? Our family pediatrician informed us that school nurses are going to have to send any child displaying symptoms home and will require testing prior to return.
So right now, if a child is displaying symptoms, the school nurse will send them home to the parent, and the parent will be responsible to take them to their pediatrician. If a child ends up testing positive for COVID-19, my immediate phone call is to the county health department, and then they tell me what to do. We have to follow their protocols and procedures. So I will follow them, and we will cooperate with them in contact tracing.
I know we fielded some questions too. A student that has chronic ear infections that might get a fever often, and we know that there's a history of that. The nurse is going to be checking for those things first, right? And not just assuming that anytime something's wrong, that's the COVID case. So we're looking for symptoms or things that are out of normal or not typical for that student's medical history too. So there are some cases where it's not going to be an automatic COVID testing.
Right, and I think we need to do some training with the staff on symptoms of COVID-19 prior to the start of the school year. That is one of the requirements. We're looking at if a student's going to be sent down, we're going to be asking the teacher to call down to the nurse first and explain that, they're sending down a student for assessment. The nurse will be meeting that child out in the hallway to take a temp and do a screen on it. And then we do have in each building an isolation room to put that student in if it's deemed that we need to call the parent to come in and pick them up and keep the student there.
Thank you. Are there any thoughts around some classes being held outside as weather permits?
Brandy, go ahead. I saw you on mute.
So yes, we're going to encourage our teachers to take students for walks, and they can take their classes outside and socially distance. If the weather's nice and the ground is dry, get out there. We're going to encourage a playground schedule to get students outside and moving and on the playground. We have some leeway as long as the weather's nice, but we know it's Western New York, so we don't have that many days or that many weeks of the school year that we can get outside and just teach on the ground. But that will be somewhat up to the teacher's discretion to utilize that space when the weather is wonderful.
What are the times allowed to drop off and pick up for elementary? Are they allowed to be dropped off early to avoid the student having to ride the bus?
Jamie, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So we're doing drop-off times at the elementary between 7:50 and 8:30, at the high school between 9 and 9:30, and then pickup times at the elementary will be 2:33, and at the high school 1:30 to 2. Those procedures were talked about in a committee, so I'll go ahead and let Brandy, I believe, was that your committee?
Yeah. So Yes, those are the correct times. We're not letting students come in early because we need to have people in place for screening procedures. And so if you are going to drop off your child, which we certainly encourage because it allows us to transport other students on the bus as needed, we'll ask for grace in the first couple of days and weeks as we figure out timing for that and get the routine down. But what we envision is that we have somebody out there directing traffic. So one car will pull up, we'll ask the COVID questionnaire questions if they've not already been answered, and then the students will put on their masks and get out of the car, and they'll come to the building, and their temperature will be checked as they come in. So it's this combination thing where it's not just about drop off, but we need to make sure that that screening process occurs, and then from that point that we also get the children to their classrooms socially distanced and not crossing paths with students going the opposite direction because the guidance frowns upon that. So there are just many moving pieces, and so we want to stay within that window.
Thank you. Along those lines, are we going to be required to take our children's temperature before they leave the house?
Jamie, you want to jump in? But yes.
Yes. And I also see questions about temperature things on the buses, so I'll hit all of that. So we are asking that all parents take temperatures and ask the COVID questions before going to the bus stop. Our bus drivers will ask if the child had their temperature taken, and they will have them answer the COVID questions, but they will be making sure that temperatures are checked. We will have devices on the buses that will allow any student that did not have their temperature taken to just put their hand up to the device to have their temperature taken before they can board the bus. If any child has a temperature, they will not be allowed on the bus, and a parent will be called. The bus will not be able to wait for a parent to pick up that child or come home. So we're hoping that parents are on it and checking temperatures before sending their kids to the bus stops.
Jamie, to piggyback off that, we understand if a child has a temp, they will not be able to go to school, but if there's more than one child in the family, will the other children be able to go?
As long as that child is not displaying symptoms, those children will be able to go. The other child could have a temperature for an ear infection, as Brandy said, so we don't want to exclude a whole family for something that may not be necessary. The temperature is anything over 100.
And in the plan, it talks about asking parents screening questions at the bus stop, specifically for elementary kids. If the parent is unable to be there because they leave for work before the bus, would an older sibling high school age be permitted to answer the screening questions?
So we're looking at putting a number of things in place for that screening option, and that was one. So it says we need to do the periodic questionnaire, and we would like to do it as often as possible just to make sure that we are keeping up with students and that everybody is safe. So we are talking about a message or a call that goes out to all families each morning, reminding them to answer those questionnaire questions. And if we can do that in a survey format, then that might be the easiest way for families that are working to be able to respond. If not, yes, an older sibling would be able to be at the bus stop to answer those questions at least once or twice a week. But we'd love the parents to be able to answer daily so that we make sure that everybody is safe. And it's a good reminder to check that temperature in the morning, because I know getting up and getting my two kids ready and myself, sometimes it's hard to put one more thing in your routine, but that's going to be an important one.
Are we allowing student drivers for the high school? How will they arrive and answer the COVID questions?
Yes, we are anticipating that we will have student drivers, and it's kind of similar to the drop-off. They will have their temperature taken before getting out and will be asked the COVID screening questions.
How will it work if my child has an appointment and needs to be picked up early and brought back? Would we call the office to let them know we are there and back?
So actually that's mapped out right in the reopening plan. You can come, but we do ask that you send the note or call the office so that we know ahead of time that a visitor is going to be there. We'll ask you to go to the main office doors and wait in the vestibule. Our office secretaries will call down to the classroom and the student will be brought down to the vestibule to meet you there. So you won't actually come fully into the building, and that will allow us to get the student safely out to you. And then get the door handles and everything sanitized again. And when you come back, you'll just bring the student again into those main doors, and we will rescreen and re-temperature check students for them to enter the building again.
Thank you. Will the playgrounds be disinfected between classes using them?
We are following the guidance for that, and the guidance does not say that we need to sanitize between every class. It does say that students need to wash their hands before getting on and upon leaving the playground, and that because it's going to be a higher touch area that we sanitize more often. So we will do frequent cleaning of the playground, but it will not be between every single class.
And how are we cleaning areas, and what training are we providing for our staff? Who will be overseeing that to ensure that we are all doing our job?
Mary?
So we will be cleaning all areas during the day, working our way through the high touch areas, the doorknobs, the handrails on the stairs, and everything will receive, and bathrooms will receive multiple cleanings a day. At the end of the day, we have a checklist for our cleaners to follow for every room that they go into, paying particularly close attention to high touch surfaces within the classroom. The person who will be overseeing that will be Mr. Van Zyl, our Director of Facilities. We will be using cleaning agents that are approved by the Department of Health and the Environmental Protection Agency.
In addition to that, we have been exploring dedicated cleaners for areas such as bathrooms in both buildings. So that will be additional staff where literally their job all day will be to clean the bathrooms in accordance to the guidelines with the approved cleaners, and also looking at different ways that we can monitor traffic in and out of the bathroom so that social distancing is maintained at all times.
Will students use lockers, and what will a typical elementary classroom look like?
Brandy, you want to take both of those?
The guidance does not recommend the use of lockers, so we will be discouraging those to start the year. So students will have their materials probably just on the back of their chairs and their backpacks. A typical elementary classroom, I hope, is going to look just as bright and welcoming as they typically do. The difference being that most students will be at desks 6 feet apart, but they're not going to be crazy partitions between every desk, and they'll be able to see their friends, and they'll be able to see forward, and teachers can still project their lessons and visuals to support the students, and there'll still be posters, and students are just going to have more individual baggies of manipulatives and materials to help them throughout the day instead of a lot of collaboration, which we highly encourage, but right now it's not the best thing for everybody's safety.
Just kidding. At this point, that was the last of the questions in the Zoom chat.
Okay, last time we went to end this, we got 3 more, so I'm going to give it a second before we did one of these at 4 o'clock. So we're getting better at it slowly, working out the kinks. Courtney, you want to do the last one? Thank you, Jeremy.
So it says, gosh, guys, thanks to everyone for thoughtful questions and answers. The world is so crazy right now. I cannot imagine assimilating the complexities and having to create plans like this. And it's hard to imagine buildings full of folks right now too. Thanks for trying your best. Do something tonight to relax a minute and breathe.
Thank you. We're going to go to a board meeting, Jeremy. We're excited about it. We'll be relaxing and breathing. So just before we get off the line, we do have our school board here. They're at the Pine Valley Cafeteria. Jeff, if you can hear me, do you want to say a few words? Let's see if he unmutes. All right, Jeff, if you can hear me, please unmute and cut me off. But thank you so much to everyone for joining in tonight. If you have follow-up questions, I really want to be approachable. You can email me, tweet at me, call me, whatever, and we will answer your questions. If you don't remember who handles each area, I might have to say, you know what, you got to go to this person for that answer, because as much as I know the overarching plan, those little nitty gritty details I don't want to mess up. So I will get you to whoever will have the little detail for you, or I'll get the answer for you. Just please know, as we move forward, I'm so thankful to be in this community. The outpouring of support for us at every single stage here has been overwhelming. I'm hearing horror stories. I was in a full body sweat before doing these tonight because of the horror stories I've heard from other districts, and our community has been absolutely wonderful, open-minded, supportive. Thank you so much, and thank you for tuning in, and we're going to work with you the best we can as we evolve in this process. Have a nice night, Pine Valley. Thank you, administrators.